it's kind of crazy. We were talking about like now when you start to like put all the magazines and stuff on the table, you were like, okay, we're on the cover the one time, and then you guys got the big feature, and then you're on the cover, and there's some feature of us in here. It was like kind of crazy to see. It was just really I don't know, maybe a couple year stretch where it was just like back to back. It seemed like every month.
Yeah. I mean, it's becoming quite evident just going through them, like you said, you know, like even on the spines, it's together.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, it's quite a relentless onslaught of bullet Trivium.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's the same one there.
Same one there as well?
Yeah.
Here too?
Yeah.
Flipped around.
Well, it's the third magazine that has that. Yeah, it's
crazy,
it's almost as if someone knew.
Yeah, it was like kind of what you're saying, like there's just so many like parallels with like people we've worked with, shows we've done together, like festivals, like the 2006 download being the one where we got up on stage with Metallica. It was like doing the Die Die My Darling cover with them. You said it was they were on the GNR day, I think, and we were on the Metallica day.
Yeah, because all the pictures for this whole feature was shot at that backstage. Yeah, this came out, I can't remember where
Yeah, it's download 2006, that one.
Yeah, this is August 2006 issue, so this was like 2 months after?
Yeah.
So we shot all this, and then you guys played the GNR day, you guys obviously.
But we all sang
We did Die Die My
together.
Darling, yeah.
And I think Venge was there?
Yeah, they were there. What are the chances? 3 Mats.
Yeah,
All
damn.
fronting a band.
You know,
Popular name that year.
Testament to the hype back then, though, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and, you know, we've stood the test of time as well, so there was obviously something going on which people kind of understood. And yeah, I think, you know, to look at it like nearly, 18, 19 and 20 years ago, these kind of covers, you know, it's just bizarre how time has gone by so quickly.
I guess for like music fans back then, especially like the UK, where all these magazines are from, you gotta think like all those people that you hear about that like, oh, those were like my gateway records when I was like, you know, in high school or when I was 14 just getting into metal, and thinking how these two records like still so popular and relevant 20 years later, like these things dropped like within like a 6-month period of each other and just like really kind of took over.
Yeah, but it really is crazy, like how it's just the two of our bands on everything together for this period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like, you know, you guys were talking about how like, you know, maybe we didn't feel like a part of like a scene that was like burgeoning in a region of a country. Like you could say the stuff up in New England for us, like all the bands coming out of there. But in a way, even though we were on separate corners of the globe, kind of doing similar enough things, but being different enough to where it's like we weren't like exactly the same type of band, but there was enough of a cross section between our fan bases that it was like obvious, like, okay, there's something happening between our two bands, and it was kind of like cool to see how it was complementary. There was never really, even in the magazines, I never pitched it, I don't remember, as like rivalries and stuff like that. It was just two bands doing their own thing, kind of creating this music and stuff, and it's cool to kind of look back on that, how, you know, you see a lot of bands, like there was like this intense rivalry or something, or bands like having to do that to kind of like one up each other, and I feel like it was just kind of the music doing that. It wasn't like we got to top these guys or show them. It was just letting the music speak for itself. And I mean, you know, driving over here and listening to the Poison, I mean, as just a fan of the album, I'm like, you know, start to finish, it's just got something, you just know there's something special to it. And I think from day one we were just like, man, like this is a great album, great band, and like I never felt like that sort of rivalry. You know, it was just like an appreciation for hearing.
It couldn't have existed anyways, because when they were written and recorded, we weren't aware of each other's bands anyway.
Yeah,
You know
that's like
so
the wild thing.
Just a stars aligning for both our bands at the same point in time. It was a beautiful thing, you know?
Yeah.
We talk about movements, you know, we're talking about New England, and then there's the Bay Area and all these different things happening. The UK now, I think, is having a moment and a movement where so many bands are coming out of like kind of a similar, smaller country. We're having amazing bands. And I talk to these bands, and the bands that got them into wanting to be a band is Bullet and Trivium, which is so crazy that we're sort of like this adopted band of that territory. You guys are from that territory, but then both bands expanded, becoming international things. That I'm sure that's the case. You know, I'll talk to bands I know from Germany or bands I know from Japan. That they always talk about Bullet and Trivium, like the band I've been working with, Ryujian. They said it's Bullet and Trivium that got them in a medal, which is so cool.
Yeah, it's a great thing. It's a huge compliment. You know?
Yeah.
It's not something you think of when you start a band, is that you're going to influence a new generation of bands and musicians either. You know,
Yeah.
you're just kind of doing your own thing. But
It's like we always think of ourselves as like, oh yeah, we're thinking of the bands that influenced us. It's like, but if you stick around long enough, you become that
Yeah.
band to other people.
Absolutely.
And I mean, there's no higher compliment than someone dedicating their lives to like their passion, playing music, and you being a part of that like link there, especially when, you know, it's a band that's doing great things for themselves or, you know, busting into the rock and metal scene. And yeah, those two records definitely, they started something together, and it's like now to kind of look back on it, it's just such a great thing to see and see the parallels and differences between our bands over the 20 years and how we interlink with people we've worked with. And all those, like you said, you worked with a little bit with like Andy Sneap, who mixed Ascendancy. You know, we worked with Colin. Just all the, it's just like a weird, like, yeah, the people we've worked with and just how much we have in common with those kind of things.
I had much worse hair than you did, though. You never really had a phase like I had, where it looks like I put a bowl on top of my head.
Never too late.
I'm trying.
Never too late to start.
I'm working now. I've been wondering, what were some of the bands that got you into wanting to do what you do with Bullet? Like, what were the formative bands? Like, we talked a little bit about Metallica, Machine Head, but what were the other things that were you listening to like before and that kind of led to Bullet?
it was always kind of like 4 or 5 core bands. It was Metallica, it was Machine Head, it was Pantera, a little bit of Slayer, kind of Bon Jovi. It was anything that was kind of in that era when I was like between 12 and 15 years old, which was kind of big at the time.
Was there
And
like
then,
like what was the scene like in Wales, like as you guys were starting to like put Bullet together, like before it becomes Bullet, like what was it like kind of in that scene?
It was actually a really good scene to be part of. It was thriving. Like the South Wales area for some reason was like a really hot spot for music and bands and rock and metal and stuff. And we were just kind of part of that. We were one of the last bands that actually kind of got signed out of that area. That it seemed to be this thing that loads of bands were getting success and coming out of the South Wales area, like Funeral for a Friend and stuff like that. So there was this kind of rivalry, but like this kind of glimmer of hope as well, you know, because where we're from, you know, it's like this doesn't happen to anyone, but it was happening to a lot of bands, you know. So
Yeah, I remember at the time, like
gave us that hope that just keep going, that maybe we're gonna get our opportunity, you know.
yeah, it was like
Isn't Skindred from Wales as well?
Yeah.
yeah, it was just like hearing so much. It's always crazy when like I guess Gothenburg would be kind of a parallel to that, where it's like it's a smaller city but punching above its weight,
Yeah,
kind of like
totally.
with bands coming out of it. That's that's really cool
Yeah,
because
I don't know why. I just think it was just kind of a lot of creative people in a small area that were really kind of motivated to kind of get out and showcase their talents. Really, it's not really something that happens from that area in Wales that we're from, not historically, anyways. And there was just those early 2000s where everyone was in a band, everyone was playing shows in pubs and clubs, everyone was like going to be the next big thing.
what was like the venue in Wales that was like the one, like before you get out to the rest of the country and stuff, like what's like the place you had to play?
There was kind of only one at a kind of a more grassroots level, and that was a place called TJ's in Newport. I don't know if you ever heard of that. It
That
was like
sounds
a
super
club.
familiar. Did we play there?
Kind of sounds familiar.
think
I don't
we
know if we
did.
did though. We might have. Was that also a bar too?
Yeah, it was kind of like, you know,
We might have done that.
kind of divey rock club
Yeah.
venue.
I
Kind
have to look up
That
on
kind of sounds.
online.
I swear we
I don't know if
played
we
that.
played it, but we may have had a drink there.
Yeah, so that was the place you'd go to if it was happening. Otherwise, you'd just be in your local pubs and clubs and putting on your own events in churches and community centres and that kind of stuff, you know. So when we got to play TJs and stuff like that, and then a Barfly emerged in Cardiff, which was
Definitely did that
Definitely
yeah,
did
you
that.
guys definitely did that one. And yes, yeah, so there was lots of opportunities, there was lots of venues, there was lots of competition, lots of rivalry. It was all kind of friendly. And then bands started to break through. And it was like, oh shit. So that just gave us that motivation to keep going when no one gave a shit for so many years, you know.
That's so cool. Yeah, here was pretty different. Orlando was
I think Florida's like a weird one where it's like
Very weird.
every part of the state you go to is so different, and like the weird thing is like I was in a band in South Florida and then Trivium was up here, so that was kind of we had like our like there was like kind of scenes, but I feel like we were kind of like both the projects, like Trivium and then what I was doing, were kind of like at the tail end of like coming out of like new metal, but it really wasn't like the like real metal stuff kind of coming out that was like all of a sudden Lamb of God's coming up. It was like just before that, it was like we were forming in this like in between stage here, and I feel like the scene in Florida was always like, I remember
new metal, then it went into
well,
like
there was also
hardcore.
like the Poison the Well and stuff like that was here. But even with that, I was like, I remember thinking it was like almost like that was already happening, and it's like it wasn't the scene that I was like gonna be a part of, and it was like kind of trying to find like where we would like be at. And then when I joined the band, it was kind of that same thing. Is like, where are we kind of fitting in here?
Yeah, we've always been, well, what's interesting is like both our bands were fronted by people like, we were like 12, 13, 14, 15 thrash bands playing amongst like new metal bands, and like Dillinger just broke out in like the kind of noisier scene. And so a lot of bands were doing that. Bands playing like stuff that sounds like The Locust and Dillinger on one end, Poison the Well on the other end, a ton of pop punk, a ton of new metal, and then like screamo and stuff started showing
It's
up.
kind of cool because like if you think about it, I think a lot of times when new stuff kind of emerges, it almost kind of needs that condition.
The counterbalance, yeah.
It kind of needs like, there isn't really a set thing. Everything's kind of still forming. And then like, even with Ascendancy, obviously, you know, with the riffs and stuff, it's a very intense record, but like you were listening to a lot of other melodic stuff
Yeah, I was
that was
listening
way
to like
outside of
satanic
that.
black metal and Christian emo is what I was listening to, those two things, and then everything else I loved at the same time.
But it was like, you know, how does that, you work it into something that makes sense, because like when you say those things, it'd be like, oh,
Yeah.
that would be jarring, but
Yeah.
once you like hammer it all out, like in the jam room, it starts to come out. And it sounds like you guys were in a similar situation where it's like, there's all this stuff in flux, there's different things that are popular, there's not
Yeah.
really like that scene, and you're finding like the components of like what you started with the band, and then you find some more, and then you piece it together, and it's like becomes, for us, Ascendancy, for you, the Poison, and it's like really interesting how it works like that.
Absolutely.
I loved how our two bands, I've talked about a lot today, and I've talked about a lot whenever I talk about Bullet and Trivium, how we've just floated and been our own things that have just existed, these two separate planets that, you know, we've always acknowledged each other, but the fact that, you know, combined it equals so much more,
Yeah.
and it's going to do so much more.
Yeah, I think, you know, from our point of view, we like I said, we never were a singular thing or entity, you know. It was this melting pot of lots of different generations and genres combined, but making it your own at the same time. You know, and it's like we were never going to be just a metal band, we were never going to be just a rock band, it's just all these kind of things that we loved, and try and get it to come together simultaneously but naturally as well. You know, not trying to force it. And it took a few years of being a band for that to happen. And then obviously you start to have an identity, and you start to get a catalogue of songs, and you can start weeding out the stuff that isn't suitable anymore. And then before you knew it, you know, we just had what we had. Like the Poison just was born.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's insane to think how the Poisoned Ascendancy, just how powerful of early records they are like that. And then both bands, we tried like a bunch of things within our realms and saw what else we could do, which I think is it's a very exciting thing.
You know, our catalogue is quite diverse, you know. I mean, and we've got a lot of stick for it over the years, but we've always done what we've wanted to do.
Yep.
You know, we've never kind of pandered to what people want the band to be. You know, we never did that on the first record, and we'll never do it until the last one, whenever that is, you know. So
Well, it's kind of cool how you were talking about like earlier with the chords and stuff, like a signature thing that is like your sound or part of your sound, and how that like no matter what era you're in, it's like if you drop that into something, if it fits in something, and how it can, it's like that little piece of like your history comes along with you, you know. And it's cool because I feel like in the beginning when you're trying to like make follow-up records, it's like you're almost rebelling against that first thing, and it's like, but then you kind of learn like to embrace those things that kind of come back, and that's like, that is your thing. You've no matter how much you try to like shake it off, it's like that like kind of chord thing, it works for your band. It becomes like a signature thing, and how that's a gift, you know, especially when we get this far into it. You're like, to have something that someone can say, that's Bullet, that's Trivium, like that's like such an important, amazing thing to have. And it was cool hearing you guys talk about that with the riffs, because you know, at the end of the day, the core, the meat of all this stuff is like those riffs and those songs, you know, made us what we are, and how they came about, how they're similar, how they're different. And yeah, I was stoked. I'm inspired by that stuff.
Yeah,
just to
me
hear
too.
it, you know?
Me too.
Was another thing when you were talking about like signature things was, especially for us going from Ember to Inferno to Ascendancy, going from a 3-piece to a 4-piece and having 2 guitar players instead of 1
Yeah.
changed like the songwriting mindset and dynamic, where Ember is like basically just riffs, some chords for singing and stuff. And then as soon as we started writing for Ascendancy, like the double guitar parts were like he's playing chords and there's like lead parts over the chords hadn't been done before. So it was like kind of like that, just having 2 guitar players and you can kind of doing more stuff that you've thought about or stuff that influenced you, like if, like say Iron Maiden does all that. It would like immediately like showcased itself as like what the next step of the band was going to be, and then eventually that just kind of carried over to like everything else and just expanded upon it. But it was like something that was like for us like kind of like taking all those like old school influences and kind of the new stuff and then like adding in something that like I don't think too many other bands, at least at that time, were like singing over like Iron Maiden type guitar melodies for choruses and all that stuff. So it was like kind of became like our signature thing where like so many songs have like that kind of vibe to it and parts like that. So it was just like something like we can do this now. So it's like
frees you up for
kind of like just
I think it's cool,
instantly came about.
both bands having like kind of the similar obviously setup for 2 guys playing guitars and frontman playing guitars, and how you guys do a lot of melodies and harmonies as well, but like you know the difference between our harmonies and choices for stuff like that are like very like subtly different with like those kind of things that like obviously both have similar influences for like why we chose to put harmonies and melodies like that into the sound, but like going through like 2 different guitar or 2 pairs of guitar players, it's like a different thing. And that's like a I mean I feel like even with like your melody choices and stuff, I'm like that's Bullet like right away when I start to hear even with the vocal stuff too, like how you know the similarities and differences and how it's like you can have the same almost core set of influences, like because we love the same bands you were talking about, and how when it goes through the filter of all of us jamming
basically like cooking with a lot of the same ingredients, but you make the dish a little bit differently than somebody else.
I can't think of any other modern metal bands or many other that have our lineup, like a singer that plays guitar, a singer that plays guitar, and a 4-piece. Usually when we tour with bands, it's usually 5 pieces. Like we rarely ever tour with another 4-piece that's like set up like ours.
It's definitely a different challenge too, because like you guys got to play the riffs.
If you grew up
with Metallica,
being like big
Machine Head,
Metallica and all those guys, like most of the bands you listened to back then had someone playing and someone singing. There was like, I guess it was like more the standalone, like I guess like the thrash metal was like very few bands that had just a standalone singer. It was more like Maiden, Priest, and those new wave of British heavy metal bands that had like a singer, and then the thrash came along and was like the guitar players kind of essentially like were like Metallica and like Megadeth. It was like we couldn't find a singer, so I said fuck it, I'll sing it. And you're just playing guitar and singing, you just kind of made that your thing, and then you write differently vocally and guitar wise when you have to do both of them instead of, you know, we've ran into things where we've written the vocal parts without thinking much about the guitar thing, and then you go to sing and play it, and you're like, oh, this fucking sucks. You can't do it. You can't play the song live because the guitar, the rhythms
I think there was
don't
that
make any
one.
sense.
There's the one song I love off the Blackening. I think it's like the Wolves song, and I think Rob's like, it's like really tough to sing and play that one. 'Cause I kept asking for that, and it's just one of those riffs. You're like, it's sick, but sometimes you just got to do it. You know, don't want to dumb it down.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot on our plates.
Yeah,
on the live, there is. Shows, you know,
I was curious
it's a lot
though.
going on in the brains.
Like when you guys were putting the Poison out, was there like a specific moment that we were just like, oh shit, this is something happening? Like a big moment where you're just like kind of taken back, like, oh damn, like people know and like our band and it's like building.
Yeah, but at that point we'd had like a 5-track EP kind of thing out, so we knew that there was a bit of hype behind the scenes. But I knew the moment I wrote Tears Don't Fall is when, and we demoed it with, you know, and you guys know Ginge as well, really.
Yeah.
So that's who we used to always do our demos with, pre-getting signed and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's crazy.
With Ginge, we bought from Skindred, you know. So wrote that song, and we demoed it with Jeff and Ginge, and we listened to it back in the car on the way home. And I was just like, if this doesn't like make this happen, I don't know what will, you know. So it's like when we wrote that song, we knew that something was happening for sure.
That's so cool.
It was just so unique, and it's like we spoke about it earlier. It's just still to this day, I don't know of a band that's written a song like it. You know?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Just that bridge, man. That bridge.
It's like not where like a bridge would like for what the song is doing up to that point.
Yeah.
you're expecting kind of like something totally different, and that like total like left turn there, just like that's the that
Did
makes
anyone
it.
at the label ever be like, you need to shorten this part down, or like concise, like that whole single radio mindset?
We did do of course you do, a radio version, and it never really saw the light of day because the song really didn't make more sense, even though on paper it made more sense. you know, it's kind of the beauty of the song was because of what it was, you know. But I think, you know, it was the first time that I kind of written a song which had a legitimate chorus, you know.
Yeah.
And then it kind of snowballed from there then with the songwriting.
I think it was like Dying had the radio.
They pushed us on a radio.
It was really, it was like, oh, it's like a little keyboard.
It's an intro with the piano part and this like small like lo-fi drum beat.
Well, the thing it was like the song was it's like 2 minutes and 50 seconds. So it's like perfect single length for.
I think they just want to try to say.
And then they're like, the song needs an intro. I'm like, it has a fucking intro already. It's like a guitar intro, and you're just lengthening the song, putting another intro of the same intro that comes in. So it was like kind of, I don't know, it was just someone that was just trying to like do their job or something.
We talked about it before, but our label said Dying will never be a US single, and it absolutely should have.
Yeah, you have those moments where you miss them and you can't go back.
Yeah, because in the UK,
a bunch of those.
The UK Dying crushed, and like BBC Radio 1, and then just like you guys were doing, it's just nuts.
Yeah, I guess another kind of, again, funny parallel, but like at the same time when we were doing, I don't know if it was like after we recorded Ascendancy, or like it was around that time when we did the master cover, and then you guys did
Trivium,
and that was on the Kerrang compilation. Did you do that when you were doing the Poison session as well, or was it a separate thing?
I think it was a separate thing. Yeah, we'd already done
we did, because we went back.
Because I was traveling, so Corey did
the guitars because it was on with the Marshalls, and we did that with Mark.
I was flying home from somewhere.
You were out of town, and then so remember I tracked the rhythm guitars and the leads, and then Paulo he's like, I want to play the clean part. So you fucking tracked like the clean guitar parts, and we did all the music. And then once you got back, I can't remember where you were, but you got back and just like went in and just knocked out the vocals. It's like, because we couldn't, I remember it was like, we couldn't wait for you to get back because there was like a strict deadline to get it finished for the Kerrang thing, and we didn't have much time. I think it was like we had to do it over like a weekend or some shit. It was like very fast.
You guys did Sanitarium?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was that your first choice for doing it, or like you tried to do it?
I think we got to choose it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they let us get dibs on it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. We went straight for.
Yeah, we're doing gotta do master. Yeah, that was. Yeah.
And that eventually made it onto the Ascendancy Special Edition.
Yeah.
So that's kind of part of the history of that record now too.
So that whole era of you guys, like that 2005 to 7, was there one moment that stood out for you, like a show or a festival performance?
I mean.
With the download,
it was download. It was like download, but I would say, and you've brought it up before, is the Wolverhampton show.
First show.
Because I'm like, the download thing was like the big, like, holy crap, like this is crazy, this is happening. But it was like the Road Rage tour leading into it. The first show, we were opening the show, so like nothing had happened yet. Like we don't know what the crowd's gonna be like for anyone, and just hearing the crowd start chanting Trivium. We'd never heard anything like that, because every tour up to that point was an we're an unknown band. The album's not out yet, and it was like they're fun shows, but like no one knows us yet. So it's like you're kind of feeding off of just like being out and touring, and we're all 18 and stuff, so just having a great time. But like now it's like we're in the UK, and it's like there's something's happening here. Like people know us, and the show was like ballistic. And I mean, I would say that probably is on par with the download show. But I feel like that maybe was even crazier, because it was like we never had it ever before.
It was like basically like we did the UK dates first, then did Europe, which was not as good at all. But those UK shows did so well, and the reaction was so big. We got bumped from like the tent stage to the main stage on download from that tour, and even going off that first show, like the kind of like oh shit moment was even before we even played. It was like just the fact that we had been touring America for. Even way before we even recorded Ascendancy, just to get like, label was just putting us on whatever tours to get us like just live, just get out on the road and just kind of get our kind of feet wet or whatever. And then I remember getting off the bus at like the first show, and just, you never expected, we've done so many shows in America where like no one knows who the fuck you are, no one cares. So you just kind of go about your thing. And I remember the first show getting off the bus and just like seeing all these fans just coming up like wanting pictures and autographs, and this Ascendancy had come out a couple weeks before and wanting us to sign the CD. It was like never experienced anything. Like, oh shit, people know us. Like this is crazy. And it was like just kind of like a shock, because it's like the first time it ever happened where someone actually like recognized you or wanted your autograph on something or take your picture. And then it was like parlayed that into like that first show just being like just like a crazy experience. It was just like, oh wow, this is what it can be like.
Yeah,
huh?
I mean, before that,
pretty
it
cool.
was rough. Before that, like no one liked us anywhere. So
It was
Well,
funny.
it's part of the process, though.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's
It was like we
for
toured.
everybody.
We did all those tours, especially even like our first full North American tour with that Machine Head tour.
Yeah.
Ascendancy, we hadn't even recorded it yet, so we were doing all these shows where like no one had any reference
But it's
or
great
heard
because
anything
no one,
that they
there's like
could.
not any video of any of this stuff. So
I know,
it was like
because
we
we were-
basically got to rehearse,
Yeah,
figure out
thankfully,
who the
because
hell we
that
were.
Machine Head
yeah.
tour, all we're doing was playing the demo versions of Ascendancy, which weren't that. Some of them had some
Yeah,
cringe
it's a couple
parts
rough,
on.
couple rough spots.
But we were just playing them because we're like, oh, right after this tour, we're going straight into the studio, so we need to practice these songs, get the reps. So we were just playing them however we had up to that point. We had 3 different set lists that we rotated so we could at least play all the songs, and then went straight into the studio. So we kind of used that tour, and thankfully, because then kind of sucked to have some of those old versions
Yeah,
of the
well,
songs.
hey, that's a difference. How we were saying,
like
maybe
the
it's a
old
little
school
bit
way.
easier to be a band now. Maybe that's kind of the flip side of being a band now. Is that's the hard part? Is you don't get to suck a little bit, before people kind of see you and stuff. So it's like
Well,
right
it's like,
away
there's
you're
all those some of those old videos were even like there's video footage because it was filmed by Metal Hammer, but like there's like footage of Metallica playing Disposable Heroes in like 1985 before they recorded it. Like, because the bands back then are like, we have a new song, we're gonna test it out, and they play it, but there's no one like filming it to throw it online.
Yeah.
So it's like you just got to experience in the moment. Now it's like if you play anything that's remotely like unreleased or new, it's like phones
it's up
out and it's
there.
instantly on social media. So.
These magazines are making me think of one funny story though, and with the first Road Rage tour in the UK, one of the big first features we were ever going to do, it was in the Road Rage for the US. It was the second to last show.
Oh yeah, yep.
And we were supposed to have this big Kerrang feature with all the bands, and we were kind of having some problems with some of the bands on the bill. Shit happens, drama or whatever. And this is how we were really new. And maybe this is part of the attitude, like you're saying, you're like fearless, you don't give a shit. So we're like, you know what, fuck this tour, and we left the tour. That we were like, we're not playing the last show, we're not doing the fucking Kerrang feature.
So just went back
and
to
we
Florida.
we literally drove straight. We didn't stop. We all took turns driving from Portland, Oregon, all the way back to Orlando.
Place called Dante's.
Yeah, we
21 and up show, and they're like,
that was like the last straw
yeah.
for us.
yeah, and it was like, I
They're
think,
like, you can play and you got to get out.
Yeah.
I think I think me and you both were still underage. So they're like, we showed up to the show and like the venue was like,
I think only Travis was like,
yeah,
going.
like I heard your band isn't 21. So like you basically, once you get off stage, you got to get the
It
fuck
was like
out
kind
of
of
here.
humiliating too.
It was.
It was like kind of
Well, the
like, hey,
problem
you
was-
played, get the
We're in a
fuck out
van,
of
and
here.
then we hang out in the parking lot all
And
night.
the issue was like the other bands were mad because we had a backdrop and no one else had a backdrop.
Right.
But we didn't know how to like hang it up and take it down. So we would go first, we'd leave it up all night, which is kind of fucked up.
It was like before that show though, there was like all the other bands kind of like, I don't know what was the tipping point.
No, I
of
remember
why.
one of them from one of the bands came up to me. I'm like, dude, is something wrong? He's like, yeah, you're sabotaging this tour. I was like, what?
We're like playing like fucking the 20 people
Yeah.
too. That's the best.
Yeah.
part.
And it was like
That's the gig.
kind of like the rest of the tour kind of ganged up on us, and that's why we were just
Yeah.
kind of like, you know what, fuck you guys, and
I
just
just-
like
you know
And
what, I
our
think-
PR agent, Kirsten, who we still work with to this day, flew all the way over there
Yeah.
with the press people, and just they really only want to talk to us, and we didn't show up.
Yeah, I do.
was
Maybe
it
that's
Seattle.
part of.
We were supposed to do the
I think,
feature, and we're just like,
maybe that's part of the mystique, though. Maybe why, like, whoa, this band, like, they told us
band's nuts.
They told us to fuck off. They didn't even show up.
Maybe
Didn't
that's
do
what
the
we should have
last-
done. Like, the press hoisted us.
Yeah,
the
I
two
don't know.
of us.
I think Kirsten probably.
Yeah, it's probably.
Wouldn't, she probably wouldn't like that again.
I think we kind of didn't we call Justin and
Yeah.
and he was like, well, you guys got to go to the next show. There's this press stuff. We're like, just like totally,
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
not having it, and then we just like fucking had to drive,
Yeah.
like clear across like
I
the
mean,
fucking country.
we paid the price. We had to drive like a long way. That was a journey, but.
Well, it would have been probably even longer of a drive if we went to that last show.
Yeah.
Seattle
Well,
to Orlando's a hike.
yeah, I think sometimes, the early days, you don't think about the consequences of things, for good and bad. But like, yeah, I think that's kind of like the driving thing behind a lot of those records and early tours. You're just like, who's going to tell me what to do? I know it all, man. I'm 18.
I remember on that
tour,
Machine
yeah.
Head tour that we did, you were wearing a shirt that said "My other ride is your mother" on stage.
Hell yeah. Yeah. You look back, I'm like, there's some, some stuff you're like, oh.
Oh man,
it's a little-
I think back to all the old
little
interviews of
cringe,
me.
but-
I was a total idiot.
But hey man, it's like you learn, you make. But I'm like, it made some great, entertaining times and
Gives us stuff to laugh
and
about today.
and all the fucking. I mean, but the music, man, like the attitude. Sometimes you need
another
it.
thing from those days that a lot of bands nowadays don't get to experience, that I think we were on the very last part of it being a thing, is when you're the opening band, like just getting just ripped apart by the headliner's crew.
Oh man, we get bullied by a
A lot of
crew,
not safe for work stuff you could say about what people said.
Yeah.
To
They're just
us.
like, I just,
to our
leave it at
faces.
that.
And I'm sure you guys saw some of that stuff with you guys too.
it's just like that old school thing of, it's like
Yeah.
you're kind of like your rite of passage was like, you just had to take it.
Yeah.
I think we're like two of the few bands that still stand dealing with that shit, like getting bullied by their band and crews and their fans.
Nowadays it's actually kind of, it's funny
doesn't
to talk
exist
about,
anymore.
but it's like, I just remember setting up my gear on stage and waiting for line check, whatever, and just playing my guitar. I had the full half stack thing, and just one of the headlining guys' crew came over and was like, "That working?" I'm like, "Yeah, sounds good." He's like, "Well, shut the fuck up then." And you're like, "Oh damn!" And it was just total not hey, can you keep it down? It's like they just had to go 0 to 100 every time.
I remember there was a tour we did. We were supporting someone. I won't say who, and my voice was I had a lot of voice issues, so it was squeaking. I had to go through their dressing room to go to ours. And as soon as I set foot in theirs, they all started doing that sound I made on stage at me. All of them. This was one of my favorite bands in the world too. They all kept doing the squeak at my face, laughing and pointing, and I just had to walk past them.
Damn.
What's you guys have any you don't have to name any names, but any crazy man, when you get there at the first day, you just know it's not going to be.
Yeah.
I think I remember a tour where you guys
this is
said,
going to
"Fuck
be
this
a
tour."
tough one.
I think I remember that.
Well, yeah, well, not fuck this tour, but fuck this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
And then
I
that got us fucked off the tour. By that guy. Yeah,
was it one of those merch match things?
It was that was one of the points I made.
I remember that.
Yeah,
I think I remember that. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah,
too.
we got kicked off that. But again, it was a steep learning curve,
Yep.
Yeah, you learn.
but justified as well. It was,
Gotta stand your ground.
Yeah, that's one
sometimes.
thing we
stood my ground, and it didn't go well.
Yeah.
There we go.
When keeping it real goes wrong.
That's one thing that we never had, was we never got just booted off a tour after we started it. So
We almost, I almost got arrested on Ozfest.
Oh, that's right.
So almost got us kicked off that.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
All days.
fun times.
This is kind of an interesting thing too. That's we talk about what parallels, but some different things. You guys never did Ozfest over here,
No.
but you did. What were some of the big early festival tours you did here?
just Taste of Chaos.
Taste of Chaos. That was.
You did Warped Tour.
We did Warped Tour a bunch.
I'm kind of curious because we never did those tours. I don't know if for Taste of Chaos it never timed out or whatever. But Warped Tour, we kind of it's kind of a weird thing. We were kind of consciously I don't know, we did the Ozfest thing. We didn't. It just never worked out where we would do Warped Tour. And I'm kind of curious, did you guys specifically want to do those tours for festivals here in America, or did you ever? Was there an opportunity for Ozfest and you just weren't it just didn't work, or was there any
I
thinking
don't
with that?
remember ever getting an opportunity to do an Ozfest or anything. No, it was more
Yeah.
other things Warped Tour. We did that a bunch of times. We did it on the Poison, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, because I was always interested. We did Ozfest and you guys did those tours, and we never did the ones you guys did. And I didn't
in
know
my
if
head,
it
you
was
guys have done Ozfest. I thought you did, because I feel you're a band that could have done both. I feel we're a band that could have done both.
Yeah.
There's one moment where we were flirting with possibly doing Warped Tour, and then there was something that happened where we were just someone told us an experience about it, and
yeah.
we just I don't know if that really feels like something
Oh,
we
yeah.
want to be a
I heard
part
about
of.
the porta potties.
As an experience, it wasn't. It was pretty bad.
Yeah, that's what I heard. That's what
I think
that a lot.
it might have been Ken.
Yeah,
Because he went
yeah.
on Warped Tour a couple times with Andrew WK,
Yeah.
and I think
Yeah.
he told us, he's like, I don't think Matt's going to like that.
Well, yeah, Ken's got a pretty high tolerance for
Yeah, he really
that
does.
kind of
He really
stuff,
does.
too.
Yeah, because we did Ozfest, which was amazing for us, and then Sounds the Underground.
Yeah.
Except Ozfest.
I think that was kind of the thing. It was we were thinking about Warped Tour, but we did Sounds the Underground, and then eventually Mayhem kind of rolled around, and that was kind of the newer thing. But I just think about in those early days, I was kind of curious if Ozfest was just if it just wasn't timing wise, because there was really only a couple. It was 04, 05, and maybe 06 were kind of the years you would have probably done Ozfest or whatever, and then it kind of changed. It was like a different
That
thing.
kind of was like by it was like 2009, I think was the last time they
Yeah.
actually did like a proper.
What's crazy thing about Ozfest is we
Touring
had to buy
Ozfest.
onto that tour, and then those insane like amphitheater merch cuts. So
Yeah, we sold a
how did we
fuckload of
buy
s-
gas?
I mean, that's
What
why
the label's there
I
for.
forgot-
No, but that's why a
the
lot
buy-in
of
was
that's why a
something
lot
like
of
30 or 40K
a lot of
for us to
bands
play
were
it.
like, it was literally like make or break, because if they didn't break off that tour, like you were in a
Broke.
hole.
Well, it was like Ozfest. It
You
was
were
like
the
we
man.
played. I think it was like our set was like 15, 20 minutes a day.
Holy
Yeah.
shit, that's right.
And we would sometimes we'd start playing. The first band would go on at like 9:30 in the morning, and we did that like 3
But Warped
times.
Tour though, like you wouldn't know what stage you were on, right?
But that's what would,
No, the
that's what made
morning
me nuts.
of the event you'd know, and then about half hour later you might be on.
Why did they do that? Like that's why I could never handle that.
So it was bad for bands, but for crew, they would lose their fucking minds every
Oh
day,
my God.
you know?
Why do it? Like I don't understand.
I think that was just maybe
the
the charm.
incredible
So
thing,
you
like-
get to rotate, and everyone gets an experience of being on first and last and all that stuff, which
Well, it's
in
crazy,
principle is
like-
good, but it's
Yeah,
like
crazy.
seeing those original running orders of our stage, and it was like the first band would be on at like 9:30 in the morning, and you're just like thinking nowadays like.
no one
it's
would
ins-
show up.
It's no nowadays they
Yeah,
wouldn't,
no
but
one
back
would
then
show
it was like
up.
I remember we played in like Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it was
and we were
wild.
like 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning or something, because like bands would play 15 minutes and there's a 5-minute changeover, and if you were late or whatever, you like there was like, you could be playing like 10 minutes or something, but. We went on at 9:30 and there was a fuckload of people there. And
Yeah.
it's just like, man, it's like, and it'll be like a Wednesday.
Yeah.
No, even like to
people
this day, if
showing
it's
up.
not a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, and it's like 8 p.m., people still
That was
aren't
a
there.
stack bill though, so I'm like, that
But it
was
was
worth
like
getting
on
there
Ozfest
for.
back then, it was like still like before streaming, people still bought CDs, and it was like if you had a record and you were connecting with that crowd,
Yeah.
and then after your set you go to the FYE and you had to buy a CD to get in line to buy a thing, and like we'd be just selling just insane amount of CDs every single day. Like
Yeah.
it was just like it's just crazy that it was just like if you had to buy to get or pay to get on, but it's like if you could connect with that crowd, it was like really could, a lot of bands like cracked America with
Yeah.
having like a good experience or being that band that could really kind of like Slipknot broke
Yeah.
from Ozfest.
I think we
and all
saw
that
you on
stuff.
that Taste of Chaos. I think we were at that show, right? Me and you went to that
It was at the UCF Arena.
UCF Arena here in Orlando. I think we went. Hell yeah.
those are good times. I enjoyed those. Like Warped Tour was hard, but it was still fun because of the era of the band. We were new, we were young.
Yeah.
We kind of didn't give a shit.
Yeah, you don't know about like, oh man, like we're not like
Yeah,
getting
it's
good
just like-
food here, like the
We're
toilets
we're
suck.
touring America.
Yeah.
And this is great, you know.
Yeah,
And
now.
the year we played as well, I think one of the years was like 2006 or something, and it was us. It was Avenged, 30 Seconds to Mars, bunch of cool shit. It wasn't just kind of what you'd think
Yeah.
is a typical Warped Tour lineup.
Yeah.
You know, what I mean, it was.
That's like
bunch of
right
cool
when it
stuff.
started to like incorporate more like the heavy stuff into it.
Yeah. So it
Yeah,
was a cool
that's great.
experience.